What's up, everybody? Welcome to the first edition of the Against the Grain podcast, part of the Awesemo podcast series, and specifically for golf, the third and final podcast of the week. Instead of giving it to you all in one chunk, what we've decided is to break it off into three different distinct podcasts, each one featuring specific information. And also, of course, later in the week, we get more information, especially when it comes to ownership. So that's why we saved this one, the Against the Grain podcast, which focuses primarily on DraftKings projected ownership. However, we're going to go into SuperDraft here at the end of the show. And focuses on the highest owned guys and some pivots or my favorite pivots around them. I'll do this by breaking it out into the price sections. If you're not familiar with the article, I got four of them. So I've got anybody above 10K, the 8,000 to 9,000 range, anybody priced in the 7K range, and then, of course, the low-priced guys in the 6K range. Sometimes that goes really quick. Sometimes there's a lot to talk about there. So if you've enjoyed this podcast series, we're giving away part of our podcast is an Awesemo Plus weekly pass. All you got to do, subscribe if you're not already a subscriber to our Awesemo podcast channel. Give us a rating. Leave a 5-star review of our channel with your Awesemo Plus username or your Twitter handle, either or, and then we'll be giving away those on Friday. All right, so let's go in, and again, what I'm going to do here, start off with the highest priced guys and talk about at least what I'm projecting. But before I do that, what I want to do is give away a little tease here. Some of the information that you'll find behind the paywall, of course, and part of that weekly pass that I just talked about is the ownership projections from the Awesemo gang. And these are some of the best in the industry. And what I talk about in this podcast is my own projections. How I do those projections, if you're not familiar, you can head into my model and I go over it. It's pretty simple formula. I take all of their historic information in terms of how much they've been owned, and I give it some averages and little tweaks, and of course you can go see all of that on there. And sometimes I'm a little above these guys, and more often than not, though, I'm a little below them in terms of a relative to square value in the total ownership projection. So I'm going to go over the top 10 for this week for Awesemo. So we got Rory McIlroy coming in at 20%, Jon Rahm also in at 20%, followed by Webb Simpson at 19%, Justin Thomas at 16%, Patrick Reed at 15%, Sungjae Im also at 15%, Xander Schauffele coming in at 14%, Scotty Scheffler in just about 14%, Dustin Johnson in at 13%, Tony Finau also in at the high 13%, and rounding out the top 10, Colin Morikawa at the low 13%. Actually, I might have given you a little bit more than 10 there, but that's okay. I'm sure the guys won't be too upset with me there. So let's break that down a little bit. And like I said, we're going to go section by section here. We'll start off with the top. So in the first pricing category above 10K, there's only 4 guys this week. And if you stuck with me for a little while, you'll know that most of the time DraftKings actually gives us quite a bit more. I shouldn't say quite a bit more. Well, I guess in terms of a percentage more, it's normally 5 or 6. Rarely is it 4, but that's what we're going with this week. It's a total ownership of 61% from the 4 guys. At least that's what I have projected. Now, again, I have Jon Rahm coming in below 20%, somewhere around 17%. And I have Bryson DeChambeau as the lowest guy on here, 11%. And now a little bit of sticker shock likely on Bryson DeChambeau, even though prior to this long break, he was playing some of the best golf, certainly of anybody on tour, multiple top 5s and back-to-back starts right on the break. So it's too bad Bryson DeChambeau was going into some good form. I'm sure he was probably a little on the upset side in terms of relative to where his form was. I'm sure there were some guys on the other side, of course, right, that were thankful for the break. So anyways, Bryson DeChambeau, 11%. If you are looking for an opportunity to get leverage in this area, it is with Bryson DeChambeau at 2x, unless, of course, you're willing to roster Rory McIlroy at around 40 to 45% of your lineups. Certainly with his consistency and how good he's been over the last 18 months, maybe even a little bit longer, rostering him in 40% of your lineups might not be that bad. But I find it much easier to get 20% of Bryson DeChambeau. Again, he's only $10,100 in terms of salary. So if I'm looking for 2x leverage, that's where I'm going in that range. Again, I like to get 2 or 3x the projected ownership on a guy that I'm looking to go overweight. Of course, if we go into below 10%, that's where I'm looking for 3x. Okay, let's move on to the 8,000 to 9,000 range. And no surprise, Webb Simpson, as we mentioned off the top, projected right around 20%. The next guy, however, a 6% differential. And there's a bunch of guys in this range. Tony Finau, Xander Schauffele, Gary Woodland, Dustin Johnson, Patrick Reed, and Sungjae Im, all going to come in around 15%. So a lot of the ownership that we normally see above 10,000 goes to this 8,900 range. It's got 20 total golfers. I think a total ownership of somewhere over 230%. So, for an average of well over 10 per guy, definitely more than what we are used to seeing. And certainly it's normally a little bit higher in terms of the spread between the top and bottom. It's pretty evenly spread here. As I just mentioned, 6 or 7 guys around 15%, including Webb Simpson at 20. Then the other guy, where it starts to get a little interesting, is Ricky Fowler, who is going to have a lot of namesake this week. First of all, he just played a couple of weeks ago and seemed to play pretty good in that driving relief match against Rory and Dustin. Matthew Wolff, the other guy. So, and I think that a lot of the casual players will be playing this week with the Millionaire Maker and no other game in town. So I feel like Ricky Fowler's ownership is going to come in right around 15%, maybe even a little higher in specific contests. So even though he's printed maybe at the 12%, I expect it to be a little higher. Where to get leverage? It's pretty clear where to get leverage. Shane Lowry at 8,600 this week. He's going to come in around 5%, and I don't see any reason not to play him. He's a short game wizard when he's on, making putts, and certainly at the Open he demonstrated more than just making putts. His ability to get up and down, and he's a little wild off the tee, which. Yeah, of course, Colonial's got the trees and the like. Doesn't have much trouble, especially if you're in the rough. Even Jordan Spieth said over the weekend, over this past few days, if you're in the rough in the right spot, you can score here. So Shane Lowry, 5% projected ownership, has been on a good run of form prior to this and over the last little bit. So 5% Shane Lowry, definitely a great spot to get leverage. All right, moving down the list at 7,000. Again, we're going to try to do our best here to try and keep this under 15 minutes, as it's the third one, and just focusing on ownership. It seems like we're on a good number there. So, okay, moving on to the 7K range. We have 43 golfers, total of about 200% ownership. Harris English looks like he's going to lead the way. I think he's going to come in over 10%. Then I think Byung-Hyun Ahn is also going to trend over that number, along with Daniel Berger. People just like to play these guys. I totally understand why. And at 7,400 for BHA, Byung-Hyun Ahn, that seems like a really decent price, actually. It seems like an opportunity to get leverage, but that means the ownership's going to come up. I think he's around 15%, somewhere in there. Ryan Palmer has certainly been getting a lot of talk because he's been quarantined around the golf course, as has Jordan Spieth. They've been playing a lot together. So I think that it's pretty clear there's a handful of guys, I'll call it maybe 10 in that 7K range, maybe stretching to 15 that you can see around 10%, especially in certain contests. But still, a plethora of guys that you're going to be able to get under 5% that we've seen win PGA Tour tournaments in the last year, including Corey Connors, who's won in Texas at the Valero, JT Poston, who is a lights-out putter, and we certainly know how that can help you here at Colonial. Of course, the rising star from South Africa, Christian Benzenhout. I'm going to screw that up for a little while, but I will get it eventually, I promise. All of them expected under 5%. Then we got guys that are right around 5%, like Bubba Watson, Eric Van Rooyen, and Brian Harmon, Ian Poulter as well. So a lot of guys to choose from, and if you really want to go against the grain, which sometimes in the Millionaire Maker you need to. We've seen one of the lineups have a 3% guy owned, so I'll give you a couple that should be owned right around 2 or 3%. Harry Higgs, Graham McDowell, and Cameron Smith. Just 3 names that probably make a lineup or 2, maybe 5 at the most for me in the Millionaire Maker this week. Okay, our last section, which this week it's relatively quick, maybe not super quick. We've got 81 golfers, total of 100% or right around there ownership. Got Scott Piercy coming in around 4%, but that's probably because 1 week he was really chalky and it still hasn't factored out. I don't think he's going to be the highest owned guy. I actually think that'll likely go to a Charles Howell or a Kevin Streelman. I can see maybe getting up to 5%. Brendan Todd as well. He's won a couple of tournaments over that fall swing. Maybe he gets to 5% in certain contests. Matt Wallace will get a little bit of traction this week as well, but really not that many guys projected over 5%. So if you want to get leverage, making them 15% of your lineup, certainly if you're taking dart throws and you're doing 150 lineups, you want to maybe put these guys in one of every 3 lineups. So that gives you an opportunity for 30, 40, 50%, somewhere in there. So you could be able to get a couple at 3x, 4x ownership, depending on who you go with. Some of my favorites, certainly from historical, who I like to play in certain situations: Matt Wallace, Andrew Putnam. Dylan Fratelli has popped up a bit, in the aforementioned Brendan Todd. So hopefully that gives you guys a pretty clear indication of what ownership is going to be. If you want the full Awesemo ownership odds, and of course, not the odds, the full ownership projections, and mine as well, perfect time to use the promo code Schwab, which gets you 20% off the annual pass and gets you all of that information and so much more, including articles from both Ben and I highlighting our entire player pools and premium targets, as well as the Awesemo leading projections and ownership, as I just mentioned. So lastly, before we go, I wanted to touch on SuperDraft, who is sponsoring our podcast and our live shows this week for golf. We thank them for that. And the great thing about SuperDraft is they have a multiplier. And in terms of ownership, it creates a big-time difference, and you know exactly who the cheap guys are going to be that are going to be highly owned. And if you're not familiar with SuperDraft, it is the future of daily fantasy sports has arrived. Experience SuperDraft's exclusive game mode multiplier, which we're going to get into in a minute. Say goodbye to salary restrictions. You don't got to worry about any of that. You can use your fantasy sports knowledge to draft any player you want to build your own very dream team. And, I'll tell you my dream team right after this. I think it's pretty clear who we're going to have in it. Countless lineup possibilities. I'll let you experience daily fantasy your way and the way you want to. SuperDraft offers contests for PGA right now, for PGA and NASCAR, but also we'll be offering it for NFL and NBA when they come back. So you're going to get DFS all year round. Sign up for SuperDraft today using a promo code that we're going to be coming out with on our show tonight for Ben and I on the Live Before Lock. And download the app or play at superdraft.io. Okay, so the multiplier mode. We'll start with that, then I'll give you my dream lineup, or at least 5 out of the 6 guys. The multiplier effect is very simple. You got a guy like Tom Lehman, he's going to get 1.75 points for every one that he gets, whereas Jon Rahm and Rory McIlroy are going to get 1. So they're just going to get their basic 1. So 0.75 more going to a guy like Tom Lehman and Andy Ogletree. Now, when you scroll down this list, you find the biggest pricing difference that you can find in what people like to play would be Brian Harman at 1.6 multiplier. You can expect Brian Harman to be highly owned. The game at SuperDraft has advanced enough where players are starting to understand the importance of the multiplier effect. So you can pinpoint guys like that they're going to go to that are deemed safe to get through the cut or whatever have you. So a direct pivot off of him would be somebody like Nate Lashley this week, who we know Brian Harman, again, like I said, is likely to be higher owned. So now let's go over to my dream team to finish it out. So, of course, no dream team is going to be complete without Bryson DeChambeau, right? Of course. Y'all thought I was going to say Jordan Spieth, but I'm sure he's going to be on there as well. Justin Thomas, I think, is going to be a top 3 or 4 golfer in the world for years to come. So we're going to throw him on there. I think Rory McIlroy is far, far advanced, so far beyond everybody right now that he's got to be in any lineup. So we got McIlroy, Thomas, and Spieth. And Spieth is a 1.3x this week, so that's pretty good in terms of what we're looking at. Okay, so that is 4 of 6. So the last 2 guys, you got to give credit to Sung J M, but it won't be Sung J M. I'm this is my dream team, of course. It would be Tiger Woods and Patrick Cantlay, but sadly they're not playing this week. I'm going to go with a guy that I know is going to be low owned because he seems like he's overpriced at Eric Van Rooyen at 1.25x, leaving one more guy, and of course it's going to Colin Morikawa. So again, that's my own dream team. You can make it. It's no salary restrictions. If all those guys make the cut, it's likely that that's still going to cash and may, of course, even have a chance to win. So looking for more stuff, Ben and I live tonight. 8:30 p.m. live before lock. We're really looking forward to it. But until then, everybody, thanks for coming, and I hope you enjoyed the first edition of the Against the Grain podcast.